Rain pressed against the glass walls of the downtown hospital cafe, turning the city outside into streaks of silver and shadow. He saw her before he even knew he was watching, a nurse still in scrubs, hair tied back but untidy, shoulders caving in against the weight of exhaustion. She stood in line with a paper cup of weak coffee she clearly couldn't afford, coins clinking nervously in her palm as if she'd counted them twice already. Her shoes were worn through at the toes, her jacket thin, damp from the storm outside. She looked like she was holding the last of her strength together with a trembling smile, and something about the way she brushed wet strands of hair back from her face made him lean forward, studying her as though she were more important than his own time. He didn't know her name yet, but he knew one thing with startling clarity: she had nowhere safe to go tonight. And he, Daniel Mercer, the man whose company owned half the towers along that skyline, had everything she lacked. The line shuffled forward. She placed her coins down, not enough even for the cheapest sandwich, but she tried anyway. Just the coffee, then, she whispered to the cashier, throat tightening when she noticed the pity in the young man's eyes. She wrapped her hands around the steaming cup as if it were the only warmth she'd get all night. Daniel rose before he thought about it. His tailored coat caught the cafe light, polished shoes silent on the floor. "Add a sandwich," he said, setting a black card down. His voice carried the kind of certainty that made clerks nod without questions. Her eyes flicked to him, wide, defensive. "You don't have to, I want to," he interrupted, calm but firm, holding her gaze. He saw how her lips parted, how her throat worked against words she didn't know how to form. When they stepped outside together, the cold rain hit them instantly. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her, coffee trembling in her hand. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why do that for a stranger?" He studied her, the way her sneakers were patched with duct tape, the way her backpack straps had frayed threads curling like desperate roots. "Because you're shivering," he said, then softer, "and because sometimes a stranger notices what others don't." She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I'm Claire," she murmured, "nurse's aide, at least until last week. They cut hours. Her eyes darted away, shame written in the motion. "I've been sleeping at the shelter near Fifth. They're full tonight." The hook came quietly in his next words, deliberate and heavy with risk. "You need shelter, and my daughter needs a mother figure. She's 8. She lost hers 4 years ago." He didn't flinch as the words left him, though his throat tightened. "Come with me tonight. Just tonight. No strings, no hidden cost. You'll both be safer than this." Claire froze, heart pounding hard enough to blur the sound of traffic. The storm seemed to press down, louder than before. "That sounds insane," she breathed, though her eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of yearning, of wanting to believe. He gave her space, stepping back, lifting his hands. "You're right, but I'd rather be thought insane than walk away while you drown in this rain." Later, in the marble-lit lobby of his penthouse, the contrast nearly made her dizzy. Warmth pooled from soft lighting, the air scented faintly with cedar. His daughter, Emily, appeared from behind a staircase in pajama pants and a pink sweater, cautious but curious. She had the same blue eyes as him, bright yet carrying shadows too old for her age. "Who's this?" Emily asked, clinging to a stuffed rabbit. "This is Claire," Daniel said gently. "She's someone who needed a little help tonight." Emily tilted her head, then smiled shyly. "Do you like hot chocolate? Daddy makes it better than anyone." Claire's throat constricted. She nodded quickly, hiding the sting of tears. But in the kitchen, with marble counters gleaming, she caught sight of her reflection in the black glass oven. Her hair damp, her face pale, jacket clinging, like a reminder she didn't belong here. She pulled her arms around herself, shrinking, whispering, "I can't stay. This isn't my world." Daniel caught the words. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching her carefully. "Maybe it could be," he said. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp with both hope and fear. She shook her head, whispering, "I don't want charity. I've lived on scraps, with eviction notices curling on my door and empty fridges humming in the dark, but I still have dignity. I can't just become a project for some lonely CEO." The silence afterward was thick, interrupted only by Emily's small laughter from the living room. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't need a project," he said slowly. "I need honesty, and right now I see a woman who's stronger than she knows, standing in my kitchen pretending she doesn't deserve warmth." Her hands trembled around the cup Emily had given her. The smell of chocolate rose like memory, like a childhood long gone. She wanted to drink, to stay, to let her bones thaw, but the fear of needing too much made her set it down untouched. "I should go," she whispered, voice cracking. Daniel stepped closer, the air between them charged, his eyes fierce but pleading. "If you walk back into that storm, you might not get another chance like this. Stay for her sake, for mine, for your own." The thunder outside rolled deep, rattling the glass. Claire's breath caught, torn between the life she knew and the impossible offer before her. Claire stood frozen, her hand hovering over the cup of hot chocolate, steam curling upward like a fragile plea. Emily had curled up on the sofa, rabbit tucked beneath her chin, eyes fighting sleep. The warmth of the penthouse pressed around Claire, but her body still carried the shiver of the rain-soaked streets. She wanted to belong here, wanted it so badly it ached, but fear still whispered that she was only a guest on borrowed kindness. Daniel lowered his voice, careful not to wake his daughter. "You don't have to decide forever tonight. Just stay until morning, safe, fed, that's all." Her lips trembled. Pride wanted to argue, but her body, starved of safety, betrayed her with a nod. She sank into the armchair, clutching the soft blanket Emily had tossed toward her. It smelled faintly of lavender detergent, so different from the sour wool of the shelter blankets. For the first time in months, her spine eased against cushions that didn't dig into bone. In the quiet that followed, memories clawed up, of her old apartment, how the fridge hummed with only half a jar of peanut butter and a flickering bulb inside, of sitting at the bus stop counting transfer tickets while her shoes soaked through, of staring at an eviction notice curling at the corners, praying for one more week of mercy. Shame burned hot against the comfort of the penthouse. Daniel broke the silence. "I don't do this. I don't bring strangers home. My lawyers would call me insane. But Emily," his gaze drifted to the sleeping child. "She asks every Christmas if Santa could bring her a mother again. I never know how to answer." Claire's throat tightened, her eyes stinging. "And you think I could just step into that space?" "No," he said quickly. "I think you could step into your own space, but maybe, if you want, we could walk it together." The vulnerability in his tone disarmed her more than his wealth. He wasn't just offering charity, he was confessing a wound. The days that followed were awkward, tentative. She slept in a guest room with sheets softer than any she'd known, waking each morning afraid the invitation would have expired. Emily, bold in her innocence, began to pull Claire into her whirl, asking her to braid hair before school, to sit in the audience during piano practice, to taste her lopsided pancakes. Each gesture tugged Claire deeper into a rhythm she both craved and feared. But the outside world didn't vanish. At the hospital, she learned her hours had been permanently cut. The shelter line still wrapped around the block every night she passed by. Friends from her old life texted less, assuming she'd disappeared. She carried guilt like an anchor. How could she rest in warmth while others still shivered? The hook struck one evening when Daniel returned home later than usual, jaw tight, phone still buzzing in his hand. "They think you're using me," he admitted, dropping onto the leather sofa, the board, "even my sister. They say you'll drain me, ruin my image. They want me to end this arrangement." Claire stiffened, the old instinct to flee flaring. "Then maybe they're right," she said quietly, rising from the armchair. Her bag ducked, taped and frayed, leaned against the door. She reached for it, shoulders squared. I won't be the reason your world collapses. Emily's small voice sliced the tension. Don't go, Claire. The girl stood in the hallway, rabbit clutched tight, tears already pooling. You make the house feel not so lonely. Claire's composure broke. She crouched, arms opening, and Emily rushed into them. The child's warmth, the way she buried her face into Claire's neck, undid every defense. Daniel watched, eyes dark with something between fury and longing. He rose, crossing the room until his presence towered over them both. His voice was low, rough. Let them talk. Let them doubt. They don't live here. We do. And I'm not losing this because they're too blind to understand. Claire looked up, tears glistening, lips trembling with words she couldn't shape. His gaze held her there, steady and unflinching, as though daring her to believe. That night, for the first time, she allowed herself to sit at the dinner table beside them, not as a guest, but as something closer to family. They laughed when Emily spilled juice, teased when Daniel burned the toast, and for a brief hour, the storm of poverty and loneliness receded. Weeks later, Claire stood at the counter of a modest clinic, application in hand. Daniel had quietly made calls, but the job she secured was her own, built on her skill and grit. When she signed her name, she felt the weight of dignity return, not charity, but opportunity. As autumn turned, Emily skipped into school with braids swinging, her rabbit tucked safely in her bag. Daniel lingered at the curb, coat collar turned up, eyes meeting Claire's with quiet certainty. They didn't need to label it yet, family, love, future. It was enough to know that what began as a desperate night in the rain had grown into something steady, fragile, but real. The moral was written not in speeches, but in the small, stubborn kindnesses that had built their bridge. A sandwich in a cafe, a bed offered without condition, a child's plea not to be left behind. One act of generosity had rerouted a life, and in the process, rewrote 3. And Claire, once the shivering nurse with nothing but coins in her pocket, finally understood. Dignity wasn't lost when you accepted help. It was reborn when you used it to keep walking.